Hello and welcome to African Economy, your weekly dive into the key financial stories shaping markets right here on the continent. I am Wang Fonabasi Walter. Here's what we are tracking for you today. South Africa retail sales growth quickens in September. Uganda's $5 billion East African oil pipeline hits 75% completion ahead of first export. Morocco pledges $7.8 billion to revamp public transport by 2029. Putin hosts Togo's president for talks in Moscow. Let's look at how the US dollar is performing relative to other African currencies. The US dollars against the Nigerian naira exchange rate rose to 1,455 naira 66 kobo, beg your pardon, that is 2.52 with a percentage of 0.17. The US dollars against South African rand is at 17 rand per US dollar, which shows that the US dollar is rising against the South African rand at 0.0525, and that is a percentage of 0.31. The US dollars against Zambian kwacha is at 22 kwacha per US dollar, which shows that the US dollar is rising against the Zambian kwacha at 0.550, that is a percentage of 1.12. The US dollars against Egyptian pound is at 47 pound per US dollar, which shows that the US dollar against Egyptian pound is at the US dollar is rising against the Egyptian pound at 0.0400 with a percentage of 0.08. The US dollars against the Algerian dinar is at 130 dinar per US dollar, which shows that the US dollar is falling against the Algerian dinar at 0.044 with a percentage of a negative 0.03. Still on currency, the South African rand traded around 17.2 per US dollar, holding close to the highest since September 2024, mainly supported by rising prices of gold. Meanwhile, local investors accessed the latest inflation data and its implications for the South African Reserve Bank's policy decision. South Africa's inflation rate quickened to 3.6% in October from 3.4% in September, but below the expected 3.7%. Expectations remain that the central bank will resume its easing cycle with a 25 basis point cut priced in following last week's formal adoption of a 3% inflation target by South Africa's National Treasury in its medium-term budget. It replaces the 3% to 6% range that had been in place for 25 years. According to Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, the new target will anchor inflation at lower levels and bring down the cost of living and borrowing. After years of delays and political contention, Uganda's ambition to become a regional oil exporter has taken a decisive step forward with the East African crude oil pipeline reaching 75% completion. Uganda's push to start oil production as part of a broader East African effort to convert natural resources into regional economic development. Next year marks the clearest target yet for first crude nearly 2 decades after discoveries in the Albertine Graben. The line is expected to become the world's longest electrically heated crude pipeline designed to move Uganda's waxy, low sulfur crude to international market. Ernest Rubwondo, the chief executive of the Uganda Petroleum Authority, said in his statements that all pipelines needed for projects have already been delivered to stations along the route. Morocco has committed a staggering $37.8 billion to develop a clean multimodal public transport system by 2029, according to Abdul Latif Mazzouz, president of the Casablanca Satit Regional Council, announced on the sidelines of the COP30 the investment is split roughly to $1.1 billion for the purchase of 3,750 next-generation buses and $6.7 billion for core infrastructure, including trams, commuter rail, and regional rail lines. Mazzouz emphasized that regions now play a central role in Morocco's ecological transition under the country's advanced regionalization framework, noting that the Casablanca Satet region alone has committed almost $2.5 billion, accounting for roughly 40% of its updated regional development plan to both urban and rural mobility infrastructure and equipment. Africa is entering a pivotal stage in digital transformation where growing internet access, mobile connectivity, fintech adoption, and AI interest are driving demand for local infrastructure. Data centers, facilities that store and process large volumes of data are key to the shift, enabling governments, businesses, and research institutions to operate efficiently. Although the continent currently holds a small share of global capacity, recent investment indicates the continent is preparing to expand its role in the digital economy. Globally, the United States leads with 4,165 data centers, nearly 38% of the world's total, followed by Europe with around 3,500 facilities. With that said, let's look at the top 10 African countries with the most data centers in 2025. Top on the list is South Africa with 56 number of data centers, followed by Nigeria with 21, Kenya with 20, Egypt with 18, Morocco with 12, Tanzania with 11, Mauritius with 10, Ghana 8, Angola 8, and Senegal 7. Now, this development illustrates Africa's growing capability in digital infrastructure, AI deployment, and data analytics. Despite holding less than 1% of global data center capacity, the continent is steadily building a foundation to expand its share of the global cloud and AI markets, signaling a shift from primarily consuming technology to increasingly creating and managing digital innovation. A cybersecurity breach in Somalia's electronic visa e-visa system has exposed the personal data of 35,000 travelers, including citizens from South Africa, Uganda, Somalia, and Ethiopia, with Kenya topping the list globally with over 13,000 affected. The breach, independently verified, comprised personal data from full names, passport numbers, dates of birth, passport photos, and banking information used for visa payment. Security experts warn that the exposed information is now circulating in criminal networks and could be exploited for fraud or by terrorists, including Al-Shabaab, making this one of the most serious digital security incidents affecting international travelers in the region. Let's look at the countries affected in Somalia's e-visa hack. Top on the list is Kenya with 13,325, the US with 327, and the US with 2,298, along with travelers from Netherlands, Colombia, Sweden, Canada, India, and Somalia itself. Reports suggest that the U.S. government had found credible evidence indicating Somalia's newly launched e-visa system, which went live just 2 months earlier, had been infiltrated by unauthorized actors. According to the U.S. Embassy in Mogadishu, the breach occurred on November 11th, potentially exposing the personal data of at least 35,000 applicants. The UK followed with a warning on November 14th, stating the breach is ongoing and could expose any personal data entered into the system. For Somalia, the incident highlights the urgent need to secure digital systems in conflict zones where negligent architecture can translate directly into life-threatening risks. Let's take a quick break, and when we return, African economy continues. Stay with us. Welcome back. This has been African Economy, bringing you insights that matter in Africa's evolving financial landscape. And now to the rest of the stories. South African billionaire Patrice Motsepe has urged the country to shed its reputation for high crime if it hopes to attract more investment. Motsepe gave the plea at the inaugural Bloomberg Africa Business Summit in Johannesburg. Despite this, he emphasized that South Africa has enormous potential with some of the best businesses and CEOs. Meanwhile, Motsepe, South Africa's wealthiest black person, built his fortune in gold mining during the 1990s and 2000s. His company produces coal, iron ore, platinum group metals and manganese. Russian President Vladimir Putin has hosted Togo's President Faure Gnassingbé at the Kremlin for talks aimed at deepening relations between Moscow and the small phosphate-producing West African nation. Gnassingbé, whose family has ruled Togo since 1967, accepted Putin's invitation to visit, according to a statement from Lomé. Talks centered on strengthening cooperation in peace, security development, and expanding ties across diplomacy, trade, agriculture, energy, education, and food security. The leaders also addressed international issues of mutual concern, including regional security, climate change, and progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs). Meanwhile, Russia has been expanding its influence across Africa in recent years, including in Angola, the Central African Republic, Equatorial Guinea, Libya, Madagascar, Mali, and Mozambique, an assertive push that has raised concerns in Western Europe and the US. On the economic front, Togo had already imported Russian grain, and Moscow remains a major force in the global fertilizer market, standing as the world's second largest producer after China and its largest exporter. South Africa's retail trade rose by 3.1% year-on-year in September 2025, accelerating from a downwardly revised 2.2% increase in August, almost in line with analyst forecast of 3%. Key contributors include general dealers up to 1.9% of textile, clothing, footwear and leather goods retailers up to 4.4%, and household furniture, appliances and equipment retailers up to 11.4%. On a seasonally adjusted monthly basis, retail trade was flat in September after a revised 1.6% decrease in the prior month. Retail trade sales rose by 3.6% in the third quarter of 2025 compared with the third quarter of 2024. Lastly, an African economy. Zambia will host a Chinese premier for the first time in 28 years, a landmark visit that comes as the copper-rich nation emerges from a bruising financial crisis and positions itself for renewed investment. Beijing, eager to secure access to Zambia's commodities and expand the market for its exporters, is moving quickly to deepen ties. China remains Zambia's largest official creditor with $5.7 billion owed, and has showcased the country as a model participant in President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing also wants to highlight how its support can help African nations rebuild after financial distress. And that's a wrap for this edition of African Economy. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to follow us across all of our social media channels at Spectrum Television. Remember, African Economy airs live every Tuesday and Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Until next time, keep thinking progress, keep thinking growth, because this is where Africa's economy speaks. Goodbye, Africa. I am Wangfonabasi Walter.